Considering how this is one of the first, video games I've ever played, and how much of a fan of the Mario Kart series I am, it's crazy to me how it's been over a decade since I last played Mario Kart DS. So I figured it'd probably be best to take a look at it, see how well it's aged, and yeah, revisit one of my childhood favorites.
Here we go!
Released on November 14, 2005 here in North America, Mario Kart DS is the 5th entry in the Mario Kart series, and I mean, yeah, it's on the DS, so there's definitely some limitations to deal with, but in spite of that, this game is a lot more impressive and more fun to play than, you'd probably think if you'd never played it. Elements that you'd come to expect from the Mario Kart series up to this point. This game introduced a lot of new things that would become series staples, or even one-time features like single-player versus and single-player battle mode, which I'm gonna be honest, DS has the best one. Don't at me. If you say 64, you're lying. Online, albeit a bit limited. Alongside the new 16 nitro tracks, you got 16 retro tracks. We'll be talking about this more in depth soon. Because while I love to sing this game's praises to the high heavens, some tracks here, especially the retros, make me, just sit there and go like, what on earth were the devs thinking? Like, yes, I know the DS, like, you're gonna have some hardware limitations, but even then, like, especially when we're talking about the retro tracks, there were definitely better options from those games that they could have went with that would have worked perfectly fine on the DS. Hell, probably even with online play involved. Game with the service, if I didn't at least mention two unique features that this game has: the mission mode and the ability to create your own custom emblem. Even though it's usually at the front of the card and you usually don't see it much in regular gameplay, it's still cool that you're able to do something like that. And I wish, future Mario Kart games, had something like this. I'm surprised the 7 didn't even have something like that, considering it also on the 3DS had like a touch screen as well. Character roster, while small, it's definitely more of like a quality over quantity thing, and even the like overall solid fix. You got the, I guess you could say, the main 8, at least from like 64 and Super Circuit. Daisy and Waluigi from Double Dash are back. We got newcomer Dry Bones, and what the hell is that? I'm just kidding. It's Rob the Robot. You know Rob, right? The one from Smash Brothers. He had a big role in Subspace Emissary, and I think he recently came back in the new Mario Kart as a kart for some reason. And wasn't he also part of like an F-Zero GX track or something like that? You know what? Before we get into why he was in this game, we might as well talk about how he is in this game. All right? If you're someone who grew up with the game but maybe didn't like try to full on 100% it, or maybe you're someone who has little experience with it, or maybe never played it, saw videos and images of R.O.B there, is like, what? I've never seen him there. Like, how do you? Like, I wouldn't blame you. Like, to unlock him, like, you gotta get, gold trophies for all of the, either the Nitro or the Retro, like, Mirror Mode cups. Also, for some reason, alongside Bowser, R.O.B actually has the highest speed and weight stat. Then again, he's a robot, so I guess it kinda... As for competitive viability, well, his first, signature card, the BLS, currently holds 19 out of the 32, world records in time trials for this game. And as for R.O.B himself, I looked online, and found a bunch of tier lists, and it seems like he's at least, considered a high tier character. Sometimes even top tier. His main drawback is like his poor like drift stat. But aside from that, high speed and weight, decent, handling, that kind of thing. But now on to the main question: why was R.O.B included in Mario Kart DS? It seems strange, especially when you consider like 3 characters that were planned for the game, those being E Gadd, Birdo, and Shy Guy, were either cut in the case of Birdo and E Gadd, or restricted to download play in the case of Shy Guy. And while I can't answer the question of what happened to those 3, I can at least attempt to answer, why the developers, decided to add R.O.B here. Reading off the character bio from the Nintendo of Europe, website, of Mario Kart DS. Robotic Operating Buddy, give R.O.B his full name, has come out of retirement to take up a new career as a Mario Kart driver, and a strong one at that, but you'll be lucky if you catch sight of him, as he's notoriously elusive. And that's the closest to an official, explanation that I could find. Maybe there's something I'm missing, like an interview or dev, something like that. If so, feel free to let me know in the comments. But until then, I think we're gonna have to get a little creative here. In the early 80s, Nintendo had become a rising star in the gaming landscape thanks to the success of arcade hits like Donkey Kong as well as the Game & Watch series. So much so that in 1983 they even launched their own video game system, the Famicom, which even able to display Sega's SG-1000 in Japanese markets. But of course, the video game crash of '83 happened, which ended up delaying the release of the system in North America along with other markets. Since consumers were weary of video game consoles and video game home releases, Nintendo sought to redesign the Famicom as more of like a entertainment system, redesigning the system itself to look and function more like a VCR rather than the Famicom's top loader, as well as creating R.O.B the robot, also positioned as more like a toy, designed and patented by the legendary video game designer Gunpei Yokoi. Even though the device itself didn't do too well, with only 2 out of the 4 planned Robot series games ever being released, he still played a key role in the early success of the NES and even like ending the video game crash. Since then, R.O.B has had many cameo appearances and references to him, from Star Tropics and the Game Boy camera, to, of course, like being in a couple stages in F-Zero GX, and even being a playable character in Super Smash Bros. And having a pretty meaty role in Brawl Subspace Emissary. So why was R.O.B included as a playable character in Mario Kart DS? Well, while there isn't an official answer, at least that one that I could find, I'd like to think that, since the game released pretty close around the 20th anniversary of the NES, like October 18th, they thought like, as like a little nod, we can include R.O.B, and might as well, we can make him like a playable character. And come to think of it, I think that's also part of the reason why like he came back in Mario Kart World, like 40th anniversary, like same year, albeit as a kart this time. Would have been cool to have him as a playable character, but what are you gonna do? So that's my video on the first ever non-Mario Kart character in Mario Kart. Well, if we don't count the arcade titles, but that's a whole other thing. I like this video and would love to do more like it in the future, so if you have any topic suggestions, feel free to let me know in the comments below. If you want to see more, feel free to like, subscribe, consider joining the Discord server, follow me on Twitter and Twitch, and if you want to further support me and get a shout out in the next video, feel free to leave a little tip, in the tip jar. All of this is appreciated, and you can find links to all of these in the description down below. Whatever, and always remember, my friends, the real schmucks are the friends that we made along the way.